This episode is sponsored by Property Filter. Find great deals faster.
Hello and welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast, sponsored by us at Property Portfolio Building. This podcast is designed by real people on their journey to achieving financial freedom, and we'll focus on people who've either already attained it, who are joining us on that journey, or maybe a specialist topic that can help you build your technical knowledge to achieving and maintaining that financial freedom. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome back to the Financial Freedom Podcast. Today, we've got one of our technical episodes, and we're going to be talking about all things project management, and more specifically, why do you need a project manager in your development? And I'm going to be welcoming project manager extraordinaire, Tim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Sounds like a topic I can get involved in, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we're going to be talking a little bit about different things with respect to project management, but I've got a direct question. It's not actually on the prompt, so it's going to throw you.
Don't go off script.
It's going to throw you off a little bit. It's going to throw you off a little bit, but so the first question is the difference between a construction and consultant project manager. That's question number one. But I'm going to actually throw in there, and when do you need, and at what value should you be considering a project manager?
Very good question. So there's different levels of project managers, but if you're doing like a few £1,000s worth of work and fairly light work, there's not really a budget to use a project manager or like a huge amount of work for them to do. Where it would get debatable is, let's say you're doing a refurbishment project that's between say 10 grand and 70k, and depending on your type of project, there's a debate: should you have a project manager or not? Will you save money by using it? It's probably a good way to look at it. And will you reduce risk by doing it? So if you weigh up those factors, so let's say in that scenario, you're paying 5 to 10 grand for a project manager. Mm-hmm. If they come on board, they do a detailed scope of works, a good finishes spec, good general bit of information for a builder. They then price it accurately, and they're pricing because it's with that project manager that knows them, is competitive, and the details there, and you're saving that 10 grand plus the hassle and the stress and the time of like managing the day-to-day if it gets taken away. I think it's still worthwhile doing. So the answer to answer that question is probably anything over 10 grand in value. There are different size project managers for different roles. So if you did that size up to maybe £500,000 worth of work, the project managers that work in that space would be the same sort of people, if that makes sense.
Independent.
Independent sort of freelance guys who
more than one assignment at one time.
Yeah, they do multiple projects. They look at those refurb and conversion projects, I'd say. Mm-hmm. And then you might have people who do similar size value, but they might do like new build type projects they specialize in. And then when you get bigger than that, you've got more of your bigger consultancy companies that have like an office in the city or Stockport, Manchester or something like that. They might have a group of 10, 20, 30 project managers that look at the schemes, $500,000 up to like multi-million pounder developments and stuff like that.
I think a lot of it comes down to how much pre-construction work is required as well. Because if you're getting a small extension to your property, it's not really an architectural
It's a good point. So taking away value, like if you took like a HMO conversion that might be the build maybe 60, 70 grand, there's building regulation requirements, there's licensing requirements, all those things are getting more and more stringent. So by getting a project manager that knows those inside out, knows how to manage it, that will definitely help you and de-risk it. Whereas if you're doing, let's say, just a single story extension with some like fancy finishes that gets up to 70k, there's not as many like licensing and stringent requirements and things like that.
There's no change of use.
There's no change of use. So that's probably the one that you could probably manage yourself potentially.
Home improvements.
Improvements is probably it's a good way to describe it. Yeah.
Cool. All right then. So let's continue the question then. The difference between consultant project manager and construction project manager.
So I'll start. So a construction project manager, they work for the building company. So they're doing a project management role for the building company. So their responsibility is to manage generally.
And you hear this all the time, right? Oh, I've got a project manager.
Yeah. So in the property investor space that we work in, it's just like, I need a project manager. And it's like, what time? Like
my builder's got a project manager.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, okay.
Yeah.
Could also be.
Yeah. So what I'll talk about is
probably a site agent on two and your project manager on yours.
So what they do and what they don't do is probably a good way to describe it, and what their responsibilities are. So one, that construction project manager works for the building company, responsible for the labor and materials of that company, getting the project delivered to whatever scope's been agreed with them. ideally they just want to build it out within that budget and make that build a profit. And comply with the requirements of their contract
and quite often they're there to issue variations.
Yeah, sometimes some companies, they have those people engaged and the QS for the builder. Because they've priced it on like a low margin.
Or cost engineers.
And they work really hard to find variations to make a profit. Some building companies, that's their tactic. So they price it to win it, find variations after, then they'll make some money. So you got to be very, very careful of that.
Most oil and gas construction companies do that.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And then the consultant project manager. So this is your guy who's an ally as a property developer, because he's not working for a building company. Like you said, he's a neutral person working for himself. He's doing all the things that you as a property developer would need to do on your behalf. So he might engage the design team, the professionals, get those quotes, get them on board, liaise with building control. So if you're doing these small developments, the design responsibility is generally not with the building contractor. The construction project manager won't necessarily liaise with building control, or they won't, if they do, they won't like challenge him on things because they'll just charge the variations you mentioned before. All right, he's asked for that, I'll just do it. Whereas a consultant, one that's done a lot of projects, he's protecting the client's interests and going, actually, we didn't have to do that on the last one for this, and that reason. So why are we doing it on this one? And the building director goes, oh, actually, you're right. Yeah, under this section. Yeah, you're right. Maybe we don't have to do it. And he saved you money there straight away with just a simple discussion, whereas the construction project manager won't do that.
They'll just go, building control said this.
And they're not going to coordinate all the design team. So a consultant project manager will coordinate the architects, the engineers, acoustic engineers.
Ideally, tender the works.
M&E design as well, do a drawing check. And they, like you said, will create or manage the overall process of a tender pack, which also can be done by a quantity surveyor as well. Quantity surveyors do tender packs as well. But ideally you want that dual role in this space that we work in. You sort of, 50K up to $500,000 value. You want like a project manager that is good with the numbers as well. So it's like a dual quantity.
A little bit of estimation.
A bit of
put an appraisal together for you.
Knows the numbers, knows how to challenge the numbers, can run a tender process and everything like that.
Ideally knows the building regs for what you're doing as well. Because if you think about it, the construction space is quite vast. So if they've not done any of your type of projects,
it's very good. It's a very good point actually. So you can get a project manager who's delivered large new builds as an example, and you get them on board to do like a conversion to a 5-bed, 6-bed HMO. They're used to new build regs and go, you got to do this, you got to do that, and they'll probably look at things over and above what may be required. So someone that's experienced in that space is going to make a big difference. So like if you talk about our sort of conversions, like most construction project managers won't be worried about the furniture, building control, HMO licensing, all those key requirements you have to manage as an investor. Whereas a consultant project manager should liaise with all those people and manage all those and get the furniture to site, organize building control visits, all those sort of things, structural engineer visits and all those sort of things.
And technically your role at that point is turn up, right? If you wanted to have a walk around and stuff like that and have a chat with the project manager, see how things are going, right?
And you want to keep the contractor honest, because you need a contract administrator if you've got a JCD contract anyway. So it might as well be the project manager. They can monitor the works, make sure it's been done safely, see where progress is going, how's it tracking, do a certain amount of QA checks on the ground. If you don't have that person who's doing those things, as the property investor or developer have to do those things.
Yeah, especially if you're
those things.
Especially if you're not on site, you can't get site every week or every couple of weeks or whatever. I mean, you strip stuff out and you start, you start building. There's normally something obvious.
And even if you are doing it yourself and you do it regularly, you might not have you probably don't have the experience to pick up anything or raise, issues that you need to, that an experienced or a good project manager on the consultancy side will.
Yeah, good.
Does that explain it? The difference?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So specifically then, how does a good project manager save you money?
Right. So saving money can be done a few ways. So initially, they're designing it, or they're managing the design process in a way that meets what you're after and what the end product needs to be for a tenant or whatever. So a tender pack, let's say it includes the building regulation drawings, a detailed scope of works, and an interior finishes specification. So all of those things are included. So a builder can price accurately. There's no guesswork. Whereas if you don't do those things thoroughly, the builder's going to make more assumptions, guess things. And when they do that, they add in more money. So a quote with a project manager. So because it's more thorough and includes everything, you can compare apples for apples. and the builder's quoting at say 80k instead of 100 because he knows exactly what to do. And also if that project manager has worked with those builders before and they have a good working relationship, even though they don't work in the same company, and the builder likes working with them, you know, they'll want the project, so they're going to price more competitive.
Massively, like you don't, they're massively.
So one that's
changes the game.
One that's 80 goes down to 70 because that relationship, and then on the flip side, unclear scope and requirements is 100.
Yeah.
New time investor because they haven't dealt with them before and they don't know what they're like. They add on an extra 10, 20k. So suddenly,
and the question
you got to quote 110k versus a 70k.
What builders have you worked with that you could get on with?
Yeah.
Who've done this type of scheme? You know, is a good question, isn't it? To the project manager.
Yeah. So they know the right builders for the right project at the right price. Hopefully, that's the project manager you want. So they know building contractors that do that exact type of work with the right size team that can do a good job at the right price. So that's going to save you money as well as that tender fact we're talking about. So also by knowing the say licensing and building reg requirements, you know, they can A, make sure it's right in the first place in the design, B, get a plan check from building control, and then C, when they are doing the building control reviews and meetings, they're educated enough to know what does and doesn't need to be done and challenge it and things like that.
Give us an example of that.
Right. So an example would be, so you've got a building that under regs, because it's a certain height of building, technically it needs fire sprinklers, say. So under, without quoting the regs exactly, but with fire requirements, there's things called engineered solutions you can do. So if the regs say that, you can do something different if it's an engineered solution. So sprinklers say to fully do on a building of this size, let's say it's 15 grand or something like that. An engineered solution might be something like a automatic opening vent at the top of the stairs, which opens up and extracts the smoke out.
Yeah.
And let's say that costs like 4 to 5 grand or something like that. So you've saved 10 grand just in that one thing as an example. So if you didn't have a project manager that knew that, you just have to go and put sprinklers in. Building control have said it.
And your building contractor and or their
your building contractor just going to do what's on the drawing
and
and agree to it. They're going to do it. And that's 10 grand difference just in that one aspect.
I think it starts from the front end as well, which is the question I say to people, because people say, like, I talk a lot of events, and so do you. And when I ask the question, who's the most important person in your project, traditionally it's the builder. So then I said, okay, so if it's the builder, what type of architect do you need? And they don't understand that question. I said, well, you've just appointed a builder, so you are the person responsible for appointing the right type of architect. So you tell me what type of architect do you need, what type of building control person do you need? You know, because if you've not got the right project manager in, none of those questions can be answered necessarily. You might have repeat experience with these, you might use the same people, but then you can make mistakes again, which is you might have had your architectural person who isn't actually a REBA qualified architect doing works for you and then you've suddenly leveled up to a whole new thing, requiring a whole new set of regs, and you guy might not have the experience, but doesn't want to let you down. And then you've got a design that doesn't work. Yeah. You know, so
on that, what you're saying there is like, you're right. When you talk to investors also on social media all the time, people say like, I need a builder for this area.
Yeah.
And my first thought is like, hey, what about like, where's the rest of the team?
Yeah. Have you done the design review?
Yeah. Like who's doing the design? Where's the professional team? Where's the project manager? Where's the QS and things like that? But the good thing with a project manager and a quantity surveyor, they have the whole team. Yeah, because they've done projects before. They've worked with all that team and other builders and things like that. So they bring that full professional team with them if you get them on board. So it's a no-brainer for me. On top of that, you think of like the time and the stress that's involved with managing a project. Like project managers generally look pretty stressed. There's lots of challenges they deal with, but also they know how to solve the problems, don't they? So if that person's not there, you have to deal with those things head on. The builder would just be ringing you up going, this isn't working. Tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Basically.
Well, exactly. And
or they'll
sometimes
say,
it's finding simple solutions to complex problems as well. You know, and that again is like, how do you keep your variations to a minimum where you have somebody who knows what they're doing? Yeah. That can actually put the plan in place to get the variation to the minimum, you know, so, you know, the wrong type of pad stones, purling, whatever it is, you know, it doesn't matter. Steels have come out wrong or...
So variations, the way you limit them in the first place is having a clear scope and an accurate price that reflects what you want. So if you don't have those things, you're going to get variations which increase the budget. And then secondly, it's knowing the ins and outs of that. So when the builder goes, oh, there's this issue, it's not included.
Yeah.
You either go, actually, on our scope of works, we said that the roof is supposed to get replaced and refiltered. Oh, that's right, I forgot.
Yeah.
And
knowing the scope of
if
works.
that just wasn't known.
And making sure that your scope of works is detailed enough to capture and use the clever language that people use in scopes of works, like make good the area, as example. Well, no, we told you to make good the area. That includes replaster and paint, so that we're not getting then, oh, well, I'm going to quote you, make good the area by
it's
clearing my rubbish away. No,
it's detailed, but sometimes not too detailed that, like, there's, let's say you do 1,000 things and there's 3 things you missed, the builder will go, oh no, those 2 things were not on that scope, so I'm charging for that. Whereas if you're a little bit more generic, there's an argument to say they've got to do it and they can't really challenge it. So there's a few little games like that get played day to day, that's for sure.
But knowing the scope of works is a key one, right? And knowing how the scope of works is impacted by a variation, because it might come under and it might not come under. And it's about being fair as well.
100%.
But also when there is something that isn't in the scope, it's about finding the best solution for all parties.
Yeah.
And it isn't necessarily the first solution either.
No. So it's the best as in, like, it complies, it's what you need, and it's, it's a reasonable cost, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah, good stuff. So sounds expensive. If I've got a cost mindset, what is my project manager going to cost?
So obviously, well, you can look at it 2 ways. Is the project manager a cost or an investment? I suppose is one way to look at it. If they're going to save you money with all those things we talked about, generally it's an investment. You're an investor. It's an investment project.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is nothing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it will have saved you money over the period.
Yeah, I mean, if you took like our project as an example, usually when you add up our sourcing fee, our project management fee, and then what the build costs end up being at the start and at the finish, because we can manage the contingency as well.
Yeah,
it's pretty much, I'm sure it's always less than the investors or clients if they just went out and tried to do it themselves for all those reasons we mentioned. But so a project manager, depending on the size of project and complexity, it could be anywhere between 2 and 12%, I'd say, of like the build budget as an example. So it very much depends on time involvement. So that's where it differs a little bit in percentages. So if you've got a very difficult refurbishment conversion project where the project manager's got to really be involved to make sure it's done well, compared to like a really big new build high-rise development, which is hard in lots of ways, but the challenge and complexities are a bit different. The percentage of the fee might change because of the time involvement. Yeah, so it does vary quite a bit. So I know I'm a bit vague with that response, but
it's vague, but it's a percentage of the build budget normally.
Yeah.
And
so the non-vague bit is like, say, 2 to 12%. So if it's a big straightforward development, it could be like 2% of like the overall budget. So when I was working consultancy, let's say we had a £50 million project, it might be like 2% of that overall.
Yeah. That's it. The bigger the budget, the lower the percentage, right?
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
With the size stuff that we do, it's generally around the 10% of like the build cost is like a fair amount, because that gets good amount of time involvement.
Yeah.
But also,
we're
managing other projects, and
you've also got to also appreciate on those 50 million ones is how many of the professionals are there.
Yeah, loads.
So they're not doing the QS stuff or the on-site stuff. They're just literally checking ants and.
Stop the podcast now. This episode is sponsored by Property Filter. Property Filter is the #1 property tool for today's property professional. It brings in all the data points and sources from all the property portals and auction sites into one convenient place. Then you have the option to overlay all the clever strategies found in the Property Filter blueprint to find motivated sellers faster. Now, we use it on a daily basis. It saves us over 80% of our time when looking for properties. And if that sounds like something that you want in your lives, please go to register.property-filter.co.uk/PPB, which is the discount code for this podcast. You will get 2 weeks free and a discount on your first month. That's it from me. Back to the podcast.
So our size, the project manager is doing a multitude of roles.
So we talked a little bit about it before, but like our project managers, you'd say is a dual project management QS role, because they're overall managing the
budget.
They're estimating it. Yeah, they're running the tender process. They're doing initial estimates, managing the builders' variations, things like that. So on the larger developments, I think you sort of touched on it before, but you'd have a quantity surveyor and a project manager. Probably. Sometimes in the same company, but different people.
Yeah.
So the projects I used to work on in big developments, I was a PM. and there was just another QS that I'd just say, all right, you got to review those variations or review the valuation, whereas ours meet them on the ground and do that as well. It really is a dual role. So that's probably a top tip when you are getting someone involved.
Yeah.
Is like for these size projects, making sure they understand they'll do that dual role. You know, they'll do a valuation assessment on site of the works for money.
Yeah.
They will review variations, all those sort of things. Because if you pay that decent amount for a project manager, but then it's like, oh, we're not doing anything cost related or tender related, then you've got to get another professional on board, like a separate QS. So that might cost you double the money.
Yeah, no, well, and again, it's not just a percentage of the build cost, it's the number of hats that person's wearing. So even though it might be 2% to 10%, and 2% of 50 million is a lot bigger than 10% of...
And actually the scope of work
at the same time
for engagement of that project manager is important as well. Like because of those roles, it's like, what physically are they going to do? So not that we get asked that much from our clients, but, you know, like our guys we sort of just say they manage everything that needs to get done. So, you know, there's a
lot though, isn't there, to go through with the client. So you don't want to overfeed.
It's a time, you're going over too much stuff. But like, if you think from the outset, they get the drawing measure done, they meet the architect, they manage the detailed design process, they'd get the full tender packs in place, all of the design elements in there. Then they issue it to the builders to make the builders out on site, and they get the quotes from them. They assess the quotes, they check the ins and outs, and then, you know, assess it against the original budgets, you know, and then it's like, you know, the key contract terms are agreed, and get the builder on board, get a contract on board, you know, and then it's when it's on site, monitoring against all those things and doing a fortnightly report and issuing that. How's everything tracking? Talking to the builders daily about challenges or cost implications or things that are coming up, you know, liaising and building shorts. There's lots of different things that they've got to do. And sometimes a project manager, a consultant might have only allowed to do half of those tasks that we're talking about there. And if that happens, then you either need to make sure they cover it, or you're getting another professional on top of it. So you need to be conscious of that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right then. So how do I find a good project manager?
It's a very good question, because I think one of the biggest challenges for small scale developments is that the typical path for a project manager, and I know because I've been through that path, is let's say you study, like I study construction management economics at university, then you go and work for like either a big building company or like a bigger consultancy firm, you know, those ones in the city I was talking about before. And then you just work your way up in those companies. So there's not a lot that like are sort of trained or qualified, you know, from that space that get into small scale development. So we're talking like 500,000 and less. So it is,
or unless they've chosen to.
Yeah, unless they've chosen.
They might have done like.
So it's mainly guys who like want to say work on their own, do a bit of like freelance work, or whatever. Got a little like want a little bit more flexibility. Don't just want to go to an office every day or whatever. And they're a bit more of a freelance type company. They might start to build up after that and work with a couple other guys or whatever. But they're the perfect people, aren't they, for these size developments? Or your smaller firms of people that specialize in refurb and conversion developments.
Correct.
Yeah. So like anything, referrals and recommendations. If someone's done a good job, you know, you can get referrals, recommendations. Good to get references from those people and see exactly how they've gone. You know, you might be able to meet them at networking events as well. They might be looking for work, business networking events.
Yep.
All those sorts of things. And then there's like the online platforms, your Indeeds, and there's lots of other apps and sites out there that you can find them.
I sometimes see like services for project management being advertised by other professionals.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Say that again. So
like other professional bodies, so like architectural or even quantity surveying or whatever, they sometimes offer project management on top of that. I think that's a bit misleading.
So traditionally, the role, if you look traditional building works, the architect's role, I think at one point it actually incorporated the QS, the project manager, and everything like that. They were all of those roles because things like safety didn't really exist, and like the regulations and red tape was quite a bit different back in the day and all those sort of things. So an architect could design it and then sort of oversee it on that aspect. So that's traditionally what architects do. But these days, I would say they're not really general. And obviously I'm being general here. Architects aren't really trained or even that interested in managing projects, because like designing and doing drawings and designing a project is very different to the day-to-day project management. So I'm not saying 100% avoid it, but just be conscious that the architects, it may not be their specialty or their focus. So I haven't met any any architectural firms that do it effectively, to be honest, for that reason. But traditionally, because of that environment,
I still think the home improvement project stuff might suit them still.
Yeah, potentially. And especially if they're a bit of a developer themselves or an investor themselves.
Absolutely.
So they understand that side of it. So
Yeah,
they're
developer with architectural
background,
that's okay.
Yeah, if you've got an architect that does his own investments, developments in that small space, that's when it can possibly work, because they know and understand it as well as do the architectural works. But like your other architectural firms that don't have any experience in it themselves or any training and project management or experience, they're not really suited to it.
So networking events, you can advertise for them though.
Yeah, you can advertise for them, like whether it's social media, but also, it's different sites like Indeed, to find people. We use sites like that, don't we?
Yeah, networking is a good one though. You mentioned that already. So networking events is always a good one.
Your small business networking events are pretty good as well, aren't they? Because they have a mix of different professionals. You can get project managers in there looking for works.
Or you can speak to builders and ask, like, which project managers do you know?
And also asking other professionals. So like you mentioned before, architects, they don't do necessarily project management works, but they would have worked on projects in that space with good project managers.
Yeah. The Reba ones might, but the smaller designers don't.
Yeah, smaller designers maybe not so much. And then the other professionals you talk to, whether it's like engineers, builder control, those sort of people, they will meet project managers around the place.
Yeah.
So other professionals in the space are good for referrals.
Yeah.
In the way that a project manager brings in the rest of the team.
Yeah, it's an ecosystem.
These guys work together all the time, and if they do the same sort of projects, they'll come across the good people to deal with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good
Even
stuff.
now, like people, like if you took like a monitoring surveyor or something for a lender, they're going around to lots of different sites, aren't they?
Yeah.
So if it's in that patch, they're people to ask as well.
No, absolutely,
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the formal questions. I've got another one.
Right.
Going off script again. Know how much you love it.
I'm a still, so like
Yeah.
the off script stuff just is good to catch me out.
What happens if you don't appoint a project manager? What are the risks?
Right. So if you just reverse everything we've said, you've got a higher level of risk everywhere, don't you? In essence. So to start with, like if they're not overseeing that budget, so let's say you don't have a PM or a QS or that dual role. So the budget might be wrong to start with. So something's going to cost 150 grand realistically with a good builder, with a good spec, you budgeted 100, 110.
So option one, you've got the build price you think you want, and in your mind, you've nailed it. And in the builder's mind, he's also nailed it because he's only put in like half the stuff he knows he needs.
Yeah. So this is even before we go on to the build here, by the way.
Yeah.
The budget's just wrong. So let's say we're delivering at 150. That investor might struggle to get at 170, 180, but they've budgeted 120. So they're a good way off. So it's wrong in the first place. So that is obviously...
That's a good point, though, because we get told sometimes, and it's, your budget's too high.
Yeah.
And I'm like, for what?
We go, we accurate.
No, the budget's right.
We've done say 50 and they've all been bang on or, in line. So they're accurate. Whereas some people, it's not their profession. So you can't really blame them apart from not getting the professionals in.
Yeah.
But they just don't know that is what it should cost for the product they want. It might be 120 if there was like half the bathroom or something.
Yeah, and ultimately,
much
all
less.
I think at that point is A, it's still going to cost you that much, and B, I'm really sorry for the stress you're about to go through.
Yeah.
Because that is the.
So we're starting from the outset. So it's wrong from the outset. So then you're against it from day one.
Yeah.
Then the next step is you're then getting a quote from a builder, say without the detail, design, scope of works, everything that's needed.
Yep.
So then the builder's price is wrong, or it's different to what you actually want to deliver. So your budget at 120, it should have been 180. Builder's quote say 150, so it's a bit over, but actually that quote's still not right because he's priced bog standard white kitchens, white tiles, white paint, or you just don't have a spec.
Yeah.
So he just priced bog standard everything.
Yeah.
So you
or even if you have a spec, it's ambiguous and you haven't done your contractor interview.
So A is pricing too high for that spec, and he's priced at a lower spec than what you're expecting.
Yep.
Then on top of that, so you've got contract conditions you need to agree. So you've got that builder at 150. If you don't have a project, you may not have a contract, so you're at big risk from that. You may not have agreed key terms and conditions. Mm-hmm. So there's a big misalignment in what the builder believes is being agreed and what you believe's been agreed potentially.
Yeah, deposit from payment.
Common example is that
how to get paid, how the valuation process works.
Yeah, so this builder, payment terms, great example, is going, I'm expecting 50 grand deposit day one. You think you're paying him monthly because you're getting a drawdown from lender,
Yeah.
massive misalignment. So it's a recipe.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
It's just not going to work. Yeah, so there's loads of key terms and conditions you need to agree. Payment terms, VAT, program duration, building control responsibilities.
Even just going through the scope. Sat down going through it to make sure that both parties are aligned and getting them to sign it off, that the interview is conducted and these items were concluded.
Exactly. So what happens there
Contract entering in.
So your budget's 120, you've contracted at 150 on the wrong scope.
If you have a contract.
If you have a contract or you've got them on board. Because technically there's always a...
It's trading practice.
There's a... with contract law, there's some sort of contract. But it's not necessarily a JCT contract or something like that. Yeah. You've got something agreed, which is ambiguous.
Yeah.
And then that brings variations and delays. Because what will happen is they'll charge you for variation for everything. And you'll be looking at stuff causing problems because you're going, oh, I don't want a white kitchen. I don't want white tiles. I want these fancy tiles. I want this fancy paint finish. So you ask for changes. That holds up the work. Then there's variations. So suddenly the project's 3 or 4 months late. You might end up getting the spec to what you want. But instead of like that 120 budget, it's gone from 150 to 210. So instead of us being 150 from the outset, delivered at 150, you've gone from 120 to 150 to 210, 3 months late, under pressure to pay back your bridging loan.
Yeah.
Did you get building control on board? Is that signed off? Did you do it to licensing requirements? Like who's managing that? You've got all these things that could be an issue at the back end of the project, which may affect your investment, cost, risk, and all those sort of things.
Yeah, no, totally. And then best way to work with a project manager, I think, is the next. It's my final question.
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually. So you want to let them do their job, but build a good relationship. So what is the best way? So
I'm probably better to answer the question.
I'll put it back to you because I am the project manager. Yeah. So you've seen it more on the other foot.
Yeah.
So let's just flip that question back to you.
Yeah. I think I probably am best position. So if I look at my knowledge now to when we first started working together, it's different. It's much different, right? So
so our first project was 2021, so 4-ish years ago.
Yeah, so and I learn a lot. Right? So I do absorb stuff. So I'm going to go back to then.
Yeah,
if that's okay.
Yeah.
So my first thing was I don't want to do this myself.
Yeah.
Tim's got the credibility and the criteria. I'm going to partner with Tim. Tim's going to be the project manager, and my advice at that point was, by the time we'd got to the point of starting to start the project, you were driving it, right? And that is the key moment for me, which is that project manager driving the project, or are you still driving the project?
Yeah.
If you're still driving it, at some point that has to change. So if you're still having to chase, then that's not ideal. At some point, does the project manager know that from that point they are driving it, they are responsible?
Or are you chasing when you don't need to as well? Is it?
Oh yeah, exactly. Or you've not had that conversation, which is how they work or how they operate. So if you do have your scope down with your project manager and you understand what the objective is and then the outcome is, my advice is get out of the way. Simply get out of the way. Yes, touch base.
You want to be...
Yes, ask questions. Don't throw grenades.
Yeah.
Number one. And that's a nightmare.
Don't interfere with the process unnecessarily, especially.
Yeah. If you see something with layman's eyes or something that doesn't look right, or another professional's pointed something out, or you've instructed something you've not told your project manager, or any of those things, there's a way and means of interpreting data, right?
Yeah.
Feel free to ask your project manager. He might even go, oh, why have you done that?
Ask or raise is okay.
That's my job.
Yeah.
And you just go, fair, that's all right. Or you just raise it and say, oh, I'm not sure about this. What's your thoughts?
Yeah.
Have you, because the chances are 9 times out of 10, they'll go, oh yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's in hand. We've already raised it.
It's in hand. It's already raised. It's been dealt with.
He's going to fix it.
It's going to get fixed. And then that puts your mind at ease.
Yeah.
That's the best way, in my opinion, because you are going to be quite stressed out during the project, especially if it's your very first one. Because I think in our first one, I got called out at stupid o'clock at night, and everybody else would be you'd been on the wine, Bill would have been on the beer. I was stone cold,
this is the
sober, and I had to go to site.
Gas
alarms going off and stuff like that. But I turned up knowing that nothing actually has gone wrong. It's just a silly thing, and we take the carbon monoxide stuff on the street. So I just had to appease the people on the Cadent and the fire brigade.
Probably on top of this is I can add to is when you're a project manager, it's what you communicate back to the client as well.
Yeah.
Because if you go back to them with everything that goes on, you're just wasting their time,
Yeah.
stressing them out unnecessarily.
Yeah. And that's the point, isn't it?
Because we have some clients, they're like, oh, that went really smooth. I'm like, yeah, there's actually quite a few
lot.
challenges, and like there's probably 100 things that happen along the process they just didn't know about
That's it.
that we just sorted out and we delivered it within budget, and the end result was good.
That's it.
But there's no point raising them all. It's only raise the stuff that is legitimately worth raising with that.
Yeah, if it's going to cost them,
Yeah,
you have to raise it.
and it's basically that. If it's something has to change, so if building control say, actually we've spec this, but they're adamant that you definitely have to do all the fire sprinklers for whatever reason, and you hadn't put that in the scope, you have to raise that with them. You know, there's no point hiding it. It's like, you know, and this is a problem. Building control, I've raised it. It's going to cost 10 grand.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've challenged it as best I can. That's all you can do. The client might be annoyed and pissed off and whatever, but you should have the contingency to cater for that. But if there's something on side that you've sorted out, challenges that have come up, you know, the labor force has been down or whatever, and they've had a big weekend, you don't need to tell the client about it. You know, if it's fall behind schedule, you just report back and say, the builder's, you know, he's had some challenges with his labor force. He's 1 or 2 weeks behind, but he's going to do this to try and catch it up. You know, that's the way you sort of...
The worst way to turn up unannounced, 3:30 on a Friday, ring the project manager and go, there's nobody on site. What's going on?
Yeah. This looks shit.
You know,
they're doing a crap job.
I want to meet you right now.
Yeah. Come and meet me out here now. And it's
because
like,
I'll tell you now, you won't get a project manager for your second job.
No.
You know. And but if you do have genuine concerns, normally your project manager will listen to your concerns and will know either the resolution or it will be in hand. That's the general outcome. Especially during like the just after strip out stage or during strip out stage where it looks bad, right?
Yeah.
From a layman's perspective, it's going to look pretty bad if you're going back to brick, especially. And you just need to let things breathe.
The other thing, if you want to meet the project manager on site, because usually they'll schedule it out. So let's say we schedule out fortnightly visit all the time.
Yeah.
As a minimum, you go like, let me know the next time you're out on site, can we catch up while you're there? Because they're doing it anyway. You're not just interfering with their time and their day just because you're like, I'm the boss, I'm the owner. Meet me there now. Yeah. That is a common thing we get. And it's like, well, actually, I'm going to be there on next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Can you meet me there? Yeah. We'll go through stuff. And then you just have a reasonable chat and just...
Yeah, normally you'll get all your fears alleviated anyway, you know. But and
sometimes you just don't know what's going on in the background between the project manager and the builder for challenges and issues that come up.
Yeah, and you don't want to know.
Yeah,
that was
you don't want to know. Like
the key thing for
you want a bit of a holistic view of things, and you do want control of it because you are the owner, developer, or the CEO of that development. Yeah. But every nitty gritty, it's not worth your time.
No, absolutely. You just need to let them get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are your own. You are the biggest risk to any project as the owner of the project. You are the biggest risk by either not getting the right team in place.
So ideally, and this comes back to the contract and the spec,
causing issues.
Because if you give the builder and the project manager everything they need, or the project manager gives them everything they need, you're not interfering. Yeah. It's up to them to deliver. If you don't give them that, and then you're visiting site every day, you're just interfering with everything. You're blocking it.
Yeah. No, totally. Cool. All right then.
Right.
All good. So find a good project manager. That's the advice.
Find a good project manager for all the reasons we mentioned. And it'll help to save you money, stress, time, everything like that, as long as it's the right person. Because that's the key at the end of the day.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us on that one. Hopefully that's very clear on the types of projects that you can do, that you should be appointing a project manager on, and the value of doing so. And thank you once again for joining us, the Financial Freedom Podcast.
Till the next one.
And we'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you once again for joining us on the Financial Freedom Podcast, sponsored by us at Property Portfolio Building. If you want to get in touch with us about today's podcast or any of the learning topics that we've gone through today, you can email us at podcast@invest-prop.co.uk or get in touch with us with whichever your social media platform of choice is. If you think you would add value to us as a guest on this podcast, you can please get in touch and let us know what you would be able to talk to us about. Other than that, we wish you well on your financial freedom journeys. And once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.